Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm going to show you all about this new Vespiquen deck, which has been rumoured, making the rounds, talked about, put forward, however you would like to phrase it. So, this is entirely made possible by the new Pokemon set Ancient Origins, and if we have a look at the main cards, the vast majority of the important cards for this deck do come from Ancient Origins. So starting off, let's have a look at Vespiquen herself. The first attack is quite useful. 1 colourless energy, 10 damage, draw cards until you've got 6 cards in your hand. Now that's not amazing, it goes up to 30 damage if you add a muscle band, but it's still not particularly great. What is particularly great is that you get to draw cards until you've got 6 in your hand. And that means that essentially you've got an out. If you're having a bad start, if you don't have the things that you like, you can use Vespiquen's first attack to draw more cards at the beginning of the game. It's not amazing, but it's a nice little bonus. What we're much more interested in, is the attack Be Revenge. And this is basically the deck. This is the attack around which the entire deck revolves. 20 damage, but 10 more damage for each Pokemon in your discard pile. Now, new players might look at that and go, okay, moderately useful. Players that have been around for a little while might remember the Flareon from Plasma Freeze. And experienced players will realise that there is a huge amount of potential in this particular card. Now, if we have a look at the Flareon, it's got the same basic attack. 20 damage, plus 10 for each in the discard for a DCE. Flareon saw quite a bit of play. Now, I was a huge fan of Flareon. I played it at the ECC back in 2014, managed to get all the way to 5th place with a counter deck based around Flareon. And generally what happens is you go there and Flareon does all right, and then the last couple of turns of the game, you take giant KOs on EXs for your last 2 or 4 prizes. The thing with Flareon was that it took a bit too long to get going, so you would play it with other cards like, for instance, Zoroark or Drifblim, so that you would have a suite of attackers, and Flareon was good against anything that was fire weak, and you would use it to clean up at the end. Now, from the way people have been talking about Vespiquen, that's not the way we're playing it. People want to use Vespiquen as a deck all by itself, where Vespiquen is, you play it as a 4/4 line and it really is the heart of the deck. And that wasn't possible with Flareon for many reasons, but it is possible with Vespiquen now. Now you can use the Pokemon supporter card Wally to evolve to Vespiquen on turn 1. Wally allows you to just evolve a basic into a stage 1, and you get to search the deck for it, which is even better, and you can do that on your very first turn. Remember that the general rule being that Pokemon have to be down for a whole turn before you can evolve them. If they weren't on your bench the previous turn, or in the active, you can't evolve them. Wally helps you get around that. But in Ancient Origins, we also get the card Forest of Giant Plants, or as I like to call it, Broken Vine Space. I didn't come up with that name, but I'm totally stealing it. Based on the old Broken Time Space card, and the fact that it's grass Pokemon. And essentially what Broken Vine Space allows you to do is evolve all of your grass Pokemon whenever you gosh darn feel like it. So you don't have to play a Wally as your sole supporter for the turn to evolve your Combee into a Vespiquen. You can put Broken Vine Space down, and if you draw enough cards, you can put 4 Combee down and evolve all 4 Combee into Vespiquen on the first turn of the game. Job's a good un. And there isn't really much more to this. You need a DCE, and that's really good. Now, this is where the power of Vespiquen comes in. Pokemon is a fast game, and the best decks are most of the time fast and efficient, by which I mean they use less resources to get going. Or they are control or stall decks like the Wailord, and I did a video about Wailord not long ago, so have a look through my videos, you shall find a Wailord video. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description. But these are generally exceptions. Most decks in the Pokemon trading card game work because they're fast and efficient. Vespiquen uses a double colourless energy. That is 1 energy attachment and you're attacking. It is a stage 1, but there's 2 different ways, and Broken Vine Space is by far the better of the 2, to get it evolved on turn turn 1, so you can just go Combi, Vespiquen, DCE, and potentially be hitting for a quite ludicrously large amount of damage. Now, before we get into the mechanics of the deck and the cards you want to be using, I really should mention that Lissandra's Trump card is one of the main reasons why this is really good now, because it's been banned. Lissandra's Trump card makes both players shuffle their entire discard piles into their deck and means that you have no Pokemon in your discard pile. The fact that it is now banned, and I did do a video about that being banned as well, so that's another one you can check out as you're looking through here, lots of information about that, means that Vespiquen, you're not going to get 20 Pokemon in your discard pile and then have your opponent play Lissandra's Trump card to get rid of them all. Now, in terms of the basic deck, it really is quite simple. You are aiming to get Broken Vine's base out, and you are aiming to evolve your Combis into Vespiquens and attach double colourless energies. Although, as a tip, don't be careful of your opponent's deck. If you know they're playing cards like Enhanced Hammer or Xerasic that can discard special energies, then do not attach them until you actually need them. If your opponent's discarding DCEs before you've used them, your deck is going to go downhill quite quickly. But you need to get Pokemon in the discard pile, and there's a few different options. Now, these aren't the only options, but your main options are things like Ultra Ball, discard 2 cards, search for any Pokemon, and this is going to be your preferred Pokemon search in this deck. You can use it to get the Combi or the Vespiquen or any other Pokemon in the deck, and you can discard a couple Pokemon while you're at it. You're not always going to have 2 Pokemon in hand with which to use Ultra Ball, but it's still better than the alternative. A lot of people have been talking about using Ultra Ball, which got a reprint in Ancient Origins, because both Combi and Vespiquen have less than 90 HP. And my response to that would be very simply, yeah, but you're not just trying to get Vespiquen out. Getting Vespiquen out isn't what wins you the game. Getting Vespiquen out with a whole bunch of Pokemon in the discard pile is what wins you the game. And the list that I've been throwing around, currently they don't have Level Ball in because the discard from Ultra Ball is too powerful. The other really good cards are Battle Compressor. Discard 3 cards from your deck. This is wonderful. As we're going to be talking about, you'll be playing a whole bunch of support Pokemon. So for Battle Compressor, what you can do is just search your deck for your support Pokemon and then discard them. You're not going to draw into them by mistake. You're going to thin your deck so you've got less cards in your deck and more chance of drawing what you want, and you're fueling Vespiquen's attack. But in other matchups, you use a support Pokemon. And another card that came out in Ancient Origins and really helps this deck is Unknown. Now, I talked about this in my top 10 cards from Ancient Origins video, another one you should check out, and I believe it's, 2 videos ago, so check that one out. Be careful with Unknown, the ability only works when it's on your bench. You discard it, you draw a card. So every time you draw into an Unknown, assuming that you're not ability locked by something like a Silent Lab, remember Wobbuffet will not block Unknown's ability because Wobbuffet blocks Psychic Pokemon's abilities, and Unknown is a Psychic Pokemon. Sorry, Wobbuffet blocks everything but Psychic, and Unknown is a Psychic. And every time you draw into an Unknown, you get to draw a card and get an extra Pokemon in the discard pile. It is absolutely wonderful. The other card you can use is Professor Sycamore, but you'll probably be playing that as a supporter anyway. Just be sure you don't discard too much that you're going to need later in the game. So let's have a quick look at the support Pokemon that you're going to use in this Vespiquen deck. Firstly, Unknown. We've just talked about him in a fair bit of detail, so let's not go any further. Secondly, we've got Evolutions. I'm talking Flareon, I'm talking Jolteon, and I'm talking Vaporeon. And what they do is turn all of your Stage 1s into their type as well. So you play a Flareon and Vespiquen becomes Fire type. You play a Vaporeon and Vespiquen becomes Water type. You play a Jolteon and Vespiquen becomes Electric type. That, ladies and gentlemen, is very useful. And don't forget, you can play 1 or 2 Wallies in the deck in order to evolve your Eevees. And remember, you've got VS Seeker. So if you're going to be playing cards like Battle Compressor and Ultra Ball, so when you come across your 1 copy of Wally, you just discard it, or you search it and discard it with Battle Compressor, then you can grab it out of the discard with VS Seeker whenever you gosh darn feel like it. That's a pretty useful ability to have. And your Vespiquen now hits for weakness on Grass, Fire, electric, and water. And remember that when you play Wally, you get to search for the stage 1 you evolve, so you just need an Eevee down, and you VS Seeker for a Wally, and you can search whatever you want and evolve it. And that's how this deck, it's cards like Wally, like VS Seeker, that make this deck really viable, because trying to play, a 1-1-1 line of Eevees with, 1 or 2 Eevees, and a Flareon, a Jolteon, and a Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon, it's going to be very difficult to get the one you want at the time you want. But cards like VS Seeker and Wally really, really help you with that. The other support Pokemon you have is Ariados, another Pokemon that came out in Ancient Origins with another really useful ability. Both of the active Pokemon are poisoned, except for grass Pokemon. Nice. So you've got Vespiquen active, and Ariados just poisons your opponent. And that does a minimum of 10 extra damage, and that's if they get out the active or die after your turn. Otherwise, the damage keeps stacking up, and that's really, really useful. So Ariados is a nice little support Pokemon. The other support Pokemon, it doesn't really count, but I'm going to mention it very quickly, Shaymin EX. Draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand. The beauty of Shaymin EX is that you want to be attacking with Vespiquen and conserving your double colourless energies. So every time your opponent takes down a Shaymin, they're not taking down the Vespiquen, and they're not putting pressure on your, essentially, setup. Although remember that they will kill Shaymin as their last 2 prizes. Boo-hoo. So, we need some other attackers here. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to want 1 copy of Sacred Ash in this deck so that you can put, 5 in any combination of Combi and Vespiquen. I was going to say combination then, but that was just too much even for me. So you can get some of those decks back. So in theory, you can end up with, 7 Combi and 6 Vespiquen for the match, and you can have enough to keep attacking with Vespiquen. But remember, when you're not using DCE, it takes 2 energy attachments to get Vespiquen attacking, and that means you can't necessarily get it going every turn. Even though you can use Sacred Ash to get the Vespiquens and Combis back, you can't attach a DCE every turn, because you've only got 4, and you'll need potentially 6. So we're going to need some other attackers, and essentially my rule with other attackers is you must be able to get them going in 1 turn, and that means a basic or grass Pokemon and 1 energy. Now, just so we're clear here, ladies and gentlemen, I am not giving you a deck list at the moment because we don't know what a good deck list for this looks like. I am going to do a testing deck breakdown. I haven't done one of them for a while, but I'm going to do one for my personal Vespiquen list, but I don't think it's one a lot of people are going to want to use. So what I'm doing here is explaining the basics of the deck, so you will have all the knowledge you need to just go and make your own Vespiquen deck. You won't need a list from me. Rather than giving you a list, I'm explaining how the deck works. So one alternate attacker is the other Vespiquen. Now, on the one hand, it's got Fury Swipes for a DCE. Well, we don't want to use Fury Swipes for a DCE. We want to use Bee Revenge for a DCE. Although if you get lucky with coin flips, Fury Swipes will do 90, 30 damage times the number of heads from 3 coin flips. So in a desperation mode, that can work. But I'm looking at the attack Bee Drain. 20 damage, heal as much damage as you do. And it's got the ancient trait Fated Double. So you can have 2 Pokemon tools on there. 2 Muscle Bands is 60 damage for 1 energy, and you heal 60. It's not amazing. We much prefer the other Vespiquen, but in a pinch, it could work. I've got a couple other examples, and these are nothing but examples. Now, my personal favourite at the moment, and I've done a bit of testing with this, and I'm loving it, is Latios EX. Because it attacks... Now, the beauty of Vespiquen is it uses colourless energy. So you can use whatever secondary attacker you like, because you can play whatever basic energy you like. You play Psychic Energy, and you can play Latios. And for 1 Psychic Energy, 40 damage, and you can do that on the first turn of the game. And you're going to be playing probably a 1-1 Ariados line, so there's 50 damage. And you're going to be playing Muscle Band. That's 70 damage on turn 1, and you can use Latios' attack going first. It's going to give you a huge, huge advantage in the mirror match, because, for instance, your Combi's got 40 HP. So in the mirror match, or against any other decks like Night March that have low HP Pokemon, you're going to have a big advantage with Latios, especially if you get to go first. And yes, I know there's a tiny chance that they're going to be able to do 170 on turn 1 of the game and KO your Latios, but I would say the chances of doing that are very, very slim. And as long as you get 2 KOs with Latios, firstly, you do 2 KOs, you lose 2 prizes, you're even. Secondly, if you take 2 prizes with Latios, then you only need to take 4 more prizes to win, and you can take those with your 4 more Vespiquen. It's not going to work against every deck, but it's going to work against some. You could play Fighting Energy and play Lucario EX. Now again, it's not amazing. Vespiquen's going to be your main attacker, but 30 for 1 energy, 60 for 2 and draw cards, 100 for free, and you could even play maybe a couple of Strong Energy or Fighting Stadium if that's the route you went, so that you can do even more damage with Lucario. It's an option. Another Pokemon I'm a bit of a fan of here is Manectric, because when you play Manectric, for 1 energy, 20 to the bench, 1 of the bench, 20 to the active, and you've got the second attack Assault Laser there, which is useful, and you can even play a card like Rough Seas to heal the Manectric, so you do an attack or 2, move into Vespiquen, and then start healing the Manectric. Remember that when you've evolved up a few Vespiquen, you're not going to need Broken Vine Space every turn, so playing 1 or 2 of another stadium is not the worst idea ever. Because by the time you've got, 2 or 3 Vespiquen out, you're not going to need to use Broken Vine Space to evolve the other one. And you're probably, I imagine, going to be playing 1 copy of Wally with your VS Seeker anyway. The last option I've got, and this isn't a particularly good option, I just thought it could be kind of fun, I don't think this is a strong option, is the Bunnelby, the Ancient Trait Bunnelby, because you can use Burrow twice, because it's got Omega Barrage to attack twice, to discard 2 of your opponent's cards off the top of their deck, but it's also got Rototiller, and you can use that twice. So if you play Bunnelby, and maybe just play 1 Bunnelby in your deck, I have said that the reason you can't just use 6 Vespiquen is because Vespiquen takes 2 energy attachments unless you're using DCE, and you've only got 4 DCE. Well, you use Bunnelby for 1 turn, you use Rototiller twice, you put 2 DCEs back in your deck, now you have got 6 DCEs, and you can just use Vespiquen after Vespiquen after Vespiquen. They are not the only attackers you can use. Maybe they're not even the best. People are going to have other ideas. They are ones that I've been told about. Now, another option I'm going to look at very, very quickly, and it's not one I'm a huge fan of, is using Bronzong. It's stage 1 metal Pokemon, and it allows you to recover metal energy from the discard pile, so you can keep using Vespiquen without having to use DCE. I think it's a little bit clunky relying on a stage 1 to get you set up. I would prefer to have a 1 energy attacker. So let's finish off looking at some of the problems of this Vespiquen deck. Firstly, and I'm not going to go into much detail because I've talked about this at length, you need to stream double colourless energy. This deck becomes a lot worse when you're not using double colourless energy. Consider putting 1 Bunnelby in just for funsies. If you don't need it, discard it and fuel the attack. Secondly, in the early game, you are very, very reliant on Broken Vine Space. And if you can't draw into it, or you can't use it, or whatever, or they're prized, then your deck is going to be slow, and the whole point of this Vespiquen deck is speed and consistency. And the third one is getting Pokemon in the discard pile. I regularly will be able to get 7 or 8 Pokemon by turn 2 or 3. About turn 2, I can usually get about 7 or 8 Pokemon, but that's still only doing about 90 damage. And if you've got, if you're being 1-hit KO'd on your 90 HP Pokemon, getting rid of your precious DCEs, and you're not 1-hitting Pokemon, or you're not even 2-hitting EXs sometimes, you can fall behind in the game quickly. And all 3 of those problems, streaming DCE, reliance on Stadium, getting Pokemon in the discard, we can put them all under the general heading of consistency. You need a consistent list which is going to get set up almost every game, or you're not going to win. The other brief problems to talk about are that you've got weak attackers. Vespiquen is a 90 HP attacker. Most decks can hit for 90 HP quite quickly, and they can just run you out of Vespiquen, and then you're probably going to lose. And finally, you can be hitting with evolutions for weakness on Grass Weak, Lightning Weak, Fire Weak, and Water Weak Pokemon. But if you're against a Pokemon that isn't weak to any of those, it can take a long time to get up to one-hit KOs, and that can be a problem. Whether we're going to get new evolutions, maybe a Sylveon to hit for Fairy weakness, an Umbreon to hit for Dark weakness, etc., I don't know. I would like to get them in the next set so that, this Vespiquen deck can really evolve. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know for the time being about this Vespiquen deck. The deck isn't even legal until, I think, September the 1st. So, don't worry about it. August the 26th is when it becomes legal. But we don't rotate until September the 1st, which is almost a week later. But the point is, play around with this deck. I don't want to give you a deck list so you go and copy. What I want to do is tell you about the deck. You are going to have a lot more success in Pokemon if you understand how a deck works and make your own list, rather than just me giving you a list and you going and playing it. You need a 4/4 Vespiquen line. You need 3 or 4 Broken Vine Space. You need 4 DCE. You're going to need 4 Ultra Ball, 3 or 4 Battle Compressor, 3 or 4 VS Seeker, 4 Unknown, at least one of each of the Evolutions, 2 or 3 EVs, at least a 1/1 Ariados line, a couple of Shaymin, about 5 Basic Energy, an alternate attacker, and, probably 4 Professor Sycamore, and then fill in the gaps. Hopefully now you understand the deck and how it works and everything like that, and you can go and make your own list. I personally am a fan of the Latios list, but most of my friends, and I'm talking very good players here, that I've mooted the idea to, or to whom I've mooted the idea, have not spoken very highly of it. But I'm going to play around with it with Manectric, with Latios, and I'm going to try some speed lists with Bunnelby, where the whole deck just revolves around Vespiquen, using Bunnelby to get the DCEs back in a pinch. As always, thank you very much for watching. Make sure you like this video, make sure you comment. If you want to give a list for Vespiquen that you've been working with, I'd be very interested to see it, as I'm sure would many other people. Or tell me if you disagree with anything I've said. Tell me some of the other alternate attackers that you think would be good in Vespiquen. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and get a friend to subscribe it if you already have. And make sure that you check out my video game channel, Wassy Plays. It's just like this, but for video games. And I have a sneaking suspicion that if you try it, you just might like it. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.